Right now, at this moment, we are setting up 2 cameras for Bruce Willis to drive to a stoplight and make a couple of wisecracks.
Whoa!
Whoa, some guy, just some asshole just like right in my frame. Who is that guy? Oh, what an asshole. There's another asshole, my producer, right next to him, man. Tapping his fucking watch. Oh, whoa, we got a driving asshole here. Okay, so, Mr. Willis, let me ask you a question here. Is this the finest moment of your acting career, or what?
This is the pinnacle. From here on in, it slides down the backside of it. Could be it. People years from now say, "Whatever happened to Willis? He had such a good career going." And they'll look back to this point, this moment.
This
was where it rolled over.
This is your stroker ace.
Smokey and the Bandit.
No, Smokey and the Bandit was good. It was stroker ace. That's where he lost them all, man. And from a downward spiral ever since.
Poor Bert.
Now you see right here. See, I'm the novice when it comes to this stuff. Bruce, he's Mr. Driving around with cameras attached to his car.
You know what's going to happen, though? And you should be the first guy to do this. Someday in the next 5 years, somebody's going to take one of these and make a feature film with it.
Oh, I know.
Almost did it with Bob Roberts.
Oh, yeah, I know. I agree with you.
Some kid, some 17-year-old kid's going to make this killer, drop-dead, poorly lit video movie that is going to be the hippest fucking thing, and then there's going to be 100 of them after that.
Oh, I agree with you.
They're going to cost about $60,000 bucks.
That was a great one. Okay.
More like that, because I'd rather give you a couple of them like that than.
Yeah, that sounds great. That was a great one.
Ron, locked up. Okay, we're holding traffic. We're rehearsing. Vials locked.
Okay, are you ready? Yeah? Yep, it's all yours. And action.
Yeah, we can hold it. We can hold it for a little bit longer.
Common sleigh.
And
Action! Cut!
All that camera's getting is the impact. I don't give a fuck about panning or anything. All that camera is getting is the actual T-bone effect. What's going on here is we can see the teriyaki donut menu from Nick's. However, the trouble is in that bad teriyaki. What we can do is we can move over the picnic table, put the extras where they were sitting. All right, shoot the picnic table out, put the camera in between the picnic table, the extras, and the teriyaki donut menu. Because all we're getting for there is the impact. All we're getting is the T-bone. All right. What I'm saying actually isn't so bad. What I'm saying isn't so bad. It's just different than what I thought. Insofar as, not the framing wise, it just seems like we're really close to them.
The corporation.
Which is not so bad. We are pretty close to them. Yeah.
Quentin,
Yes.
out of way.
Please.
Ouch.
How's it look?
How's it look, Andre?
So Andre, you ready to shoot? We're going to turn the street over to the stunt guys and let them start rehearsing.
When we're thinking about the Camaro and what it sees as it comes into its impact.
Well, the only part I'll use of that
Right at the very end.
when I had the camera in the back seat, Bruce drove in the intersection, and he goes like this. If he looked over, sees a Camaro, he goes like this. If I can have him do that, that'll be great for the Camaro shot. But I mean, that might fuck him up for what he needs to do once it hit.
Dennis, can you bring down the Camaro and put it in your contact spot?
Longer. A little bit closer.
Less control.
Is that looking good for you, Quentin?
It's great.
Nice one, Stevie. Good.
One.
Rehearsing. Action.
Well, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing really good right now.
Well, tell me what you're doing.
Well, yeah, you're kind of catching me at a kind of a my busy time. I've got a movie that's going to be coming out in December, and I'm in the editing of it right now. It's about we've been editing for about 2 weeks. We shot for about 4 months or so, and now we just got into the editing room.
The Hateful Eight.
That's it, yeah.
Now, you're shooting this in 65 millimeter, which will be shown in 70 millimeter.
Yeah.
Nobody does that anymore.
It hasn't been done in a while. It hasn't been done in a while. There's a few people that have, like, stuck their toe in there to some degree or another. Chris Nolan did a big 70 millimeter IMAX release with Interstellar, but not, the way we're doing it, and we're really doing it old school style. What they used to do in the 60s with the big roadshow releases.
Right.
So it's like, in today's world, probably 3,000 of those screens that are going to get the movie are going to be digital DCP screens. And that's not really, to me, the best way for me to see the movie. So I kind of divined a way that we could make the film, and it could still be shown on film. I go, well, let's do it like a 60s roadshow release, where it's a 70 millimeter, and they were like assigned seating, and you'd be like going to the theater or going to see a concert or something. People got dressed up, and they had the overture, and they had the intermission, and you got a really thick, nice, colorful program with all these cool pictures from the movie, and you really had an evening out. And in most of those cases, they would even show a version of the film that had 10 minutes longer, because it wasn't a double feature then. Like, no, that's what you were doing that night.
Well, question, Quentin. Why do it?
I want to bring some of the ballyhoo. I want to bring back some of the showmanship, the fun of going to the movies. Used to be going to the movies was a thing. It wasn't just this thing you did at a mall. And I want to try to bring some of that back.
Well, you said you're doing this, quote, old school. Do you or do you not run a risk of being, in effect, yesterday's man? Everybody shoots in digital now. And I'm thinking back, if you pardon the personal reference, I'm old enough to remember when I came into television news, we shot everything in film.
Yeah.
When videotape came in, some of the old school guys, and I would include myself in it, said, listen, videotape can't carry the depth that film carries, and it was resisted. But it was like King Canute trying to hold back the waves.
Right.
It just overcame, and everybody shoots on videotape now. So why am I not to believe that the movies are going to go the same way, if they indeed haven't already gone?
Well, you're making you're making a good case, and exactly where all this will end up is, we will see. I'm doing it because I actually am, one, trying to save film, and two, because I can. I'm in a position where I can do this, and I can do it the way I want to do it. To me, to just, forget about, I would never shoot on digital, all right? But we'll just say I just shot a movie on 35 or something, and then they do a few token 35 millimeter prints, and then they just scan the negative, and then out it goes into a whole bunch of theaters, maybe even through the internet, for all we know. My career now is about 20 years old, so to me that would be working to diminishing returns. That's really not the art form that I signed up for. That's not the industry, the film industry, that I signed up for. To me, the film is not just a noun. It is part of what I'm doing. It is the art form itself. It's important. The film print that you watch the movie on is important. And so initially, when it came to something like The Hateful Eight, when I first came up with this idea, I'd been wanting to shoot in 70 for a long time, as you can imagine. It was sort of like, well, if I shoot it on 65, well, then they'll have to release it on 70, or else they wouldn't spend so much money to do it this way. I mean, there'll be at least some version of 70 millimeter prints out there. But what I've actually kind of found out from doing this is I'm very optimistic that we can kind of, at least in a boutique way, turn the tide. Because maybe 35 millimeter film is maybe a lost art as far as film distribution is concerned in any kind of meaningful way. But I'm realizing that 70 isn't. Not only is 70 not a lost cause, it could be the new way. It could be the new way of making your film special, the new way that big movies, and the new way is actually the old way, but it could be the way that when people really want to put on the dog and really show their stuff, that they open up in the big markets in this kind of prints.
As for the story itself in Hateful Eight, not asking you to show your hand,
Yeah.
but the movie will be out in December. What's it about?
Well, it's kind of my first attempt to kind of dabble a little bit at a mystery to some degree or another. You have 8 characters, and it's post-Civil War, but it's not exactly clear how post it is. I mean, it could be 6 years after the Civil War, it could be 8 years after the Civil War, it could be 10 years after the Civil War. But you have a group of about 4 characters, all with different destinations, most of them with different destinations in mind, on their way on a stagecoach, on their way to this town called Red Rock. But then this blizzard kind of comes out of nowhere and finally stops them. They can't reach the town, but they can get to this place called Minnie's Haberdashery, which is sort of it's not really a haberdashery.
Old-fashioned word.
Yes, exactly, yeah. It's more of a bar, and you serve stew, and people rest up from a stagecoach drive, and they trade out horses. So they get there, and they're going to have to spend the blizzard there. And there's 4 other people that maybe aren't supposed to be there, also there as well. And so it's the 8 of them sitting out the blizzard together. But these 8 characters have all been, to one degree or another, torn apart by the war and torn apart by the conflict that has happened in America. You have like a character, Major Marquis Warren, who was played by Sam Jackson, ex-black major in the cavalry, but now he's a bounty hunter. And then you have a character like Bruce Dern, who is a famous Confederate general.
Right.
Who's right, and there's another character there played by an actor named Walt Goggins, who's like the son of a Quantrell Raiders type of guy.
Right.
And they're all in there together, mashed up with all this hate and resentment and their own philosophies and their own version of politics, all trapped in this area together.
Well, given, first of all, the cast of characters and the rough storyline you laid out, and the time period, does this or does this not speak to what the country at this moment is still discussing, Confederate flag in South Carolina, piece of the Confederate flag in Mississippi? Does it relate to that in any way?
Not only do I think it relates to it, I think it, as far as I know, I think it might be the only movie coming out this year that actually directly addresses it to some degree or another, at least addresses the chasm. It addresses the chasm, it addresses the resentment, it addresses the hard feelings, and it addresses how hard some hatchets are to bury.
In the wake of the Civil War.
Yeah, in the wake of the Civil War. In the wake of the South being lost, and in the wake of having once been a slave, in the wake of seeing a whole lifestyle change, in the wake of losing a war, in the wake of winning a war. All that is actually dealt with. I mean, it was funny when I wrote the film, and I wasn't trying to make an overt political statement about today. I was actually just following the characters and their journey and the little situation that I'd set up by putting them in this room, what's going to happen. But I really realized pretty quickly that, oh wow, this is kind of almost a blue state, red state Western. Because both communities are dealt with, and it's not a bad guy, good guy thing either. Nobody's really good in this movie. It's just bad guys and maybe worse guys, all right?
Why am I not surprised? This is a Quentin Tarantino movie, and there are not many likable people in it.
But oddly enough, though, there's an interesting thing about actually trying to get at something like that. If you don't have a hero to cast your lot in with, you don't have a character who's supposed to be the moral compass for the film. They all have their own agendas, but they also all have their own points of view, and some of them all have their own point that, at least as far as they're concerned, can be made, and they're very sincere about those points.
When you talk about a Western, and I know you're a great fan of the so-called spaghetti Westerns and influence on your career, but I'm from another generation, but I think that a lot of people think of Western, they think of John Wayne, Clint Eastwood. Your, quote, Westerns are not that way.
They're not necessarily. But I think that's a good thing, because look, I love John Wayne movies. I love Randolph Scott movies. I love Rory Calhoun movies. And but also I love the postmodernist westerns of the '70s as well. I love something like Little Big Man or Soldier Blue or something like that, even McCabe and Mrs. Miller. But I actually think if you're really going to try to make the Western genre really work its magic, then you've got to do your version of it. It's not, it would be silly for me to try to do a John Ford type movie now, because who would I be making that to? Those movies, you can appreciate them, but as far as actually being a piece that goes out and entertains the world on a Friday night, they were made for a different audience. They were made for a different America. They were made, and particularly made for white people in the America of that time, of the 50s and of the 40s. And one of the things that's actually really exciting about the Western genre is, probably more than any other genre that there is, even though they all take place 100 and something years ago, Westerns reflect the decade in which they were made more than musicals, more than period dramas, more than even comedies, actually. You know, the Westerns of the 50s reflected an Eisenhower America in every way, shape, and form. And if they didn't reflect an Eisenhower America, they were weird. They were an oddball thing. Maybe Johnny Guitar doesn't reflect an Eisenhower America, but that's what makes it an oddball film. Or consequently, the 70s reflected a Watergate era, reflected an era of where you didn't believe in the myths anymore. All those myths you were told about Billy the Kid actually being a cool guy and Jesse James actually being the lovable rogue, well, those were lies. They were killers. They were absolute cold-blooded killers. Wyatt Earp wasn't the way he was sold to us. And then the 70s took great joy in ripping the scabs off of that and showing you what hadn't been seen before. So hopefully, this is my version of you know, the 2000s, what I'm offering.
As I look at your body of work, several notions come to mind. You relish the traditions and the history of filmmaking. You celebrate different movie genres. And then there's the subject matter. Some of it pretty deep. Holocaust, slavery, oppression, redemption. I'm curious to know what your body of work says about what matters to you, what really matters to you.
Well, you know, it's funny because when I decide that I'm going to tell a story in one genre versus another, like a World War II story or a martial arts revenge kind of story, like in Kill Bill, it's that fun and my love of that genre that leads me to make that idea. And probably in my mind, whenever I think about, oh, I'll do a bunch of guys on a mission movie, when I ever fantasized about it, years before I ever did it, I probably thought it would be closer to a normal bunch of guys on a mission movie. You know, I think I always thought about when I would do my war film, it would be kind of a Dirty Dozen-y kind of thing. Well, it's a little bit like that, but it goes its own way. And so I'm drawn to the genre, and I'm drawn to the fun idea of making that kind of movie and telling that kind of story. But then pen goes to paper. And once pen goes to paper, the characters just kind of take it. And ultimately, I'm really not interested in just doing one that can sit add step with the other films that fit into that genre. I want to do them my way. You know, in some ways be bigger than the genre, in some ways elevate the genre, but not in a highfalutin way that I think I'm too much better. I mean, using Westerns as an example, I'm not really a big fan of the art film Western. You got to still make a Western first. And so I'm actually proud that my films, as offbeat as they may be in my take on the given genre, they still deliver the goods. If you like a Western, you might like mine. I'll deliver you some thrills and chills, and you should have a good time.
Now back to what matters to you. This is what matters to you professionally, what you've just described. As a person, as a man, what matters most to you?
Well, the point is, once I get these characters talking to each other and I start developing, I'm not really developing who they are, they reveal themselves to me. When they start revealing who they are, that's where the me comes in it. In the case of Django Unchained, for example, I had one main thing in particular that I wanted to do. There had been movies that had had black heroic cowboys before, but I wanted to show a character who was a slave, and it was during slave times. It wasn't after. It wasn't after the Civil War. I wanted to see him become a bounty hunter. He would break his chains. He can't just run away and be a bounty hunter, because then he would be a fugitive. You know, he had to legally, and I actually keep making a point about the legal aspect of slavery and how that piece of paper is important. He would become a bounty hunter and then apply his trade in the South. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that is I wanted to give black males, and in particular young black males. When I say in particular young black males, I'm kind of even talking about maybe some kids that aren't born yet. A black cowboy hero. And not just a fancified one. He actually was a slave, and he was even doing it during slave times. And this is sort of like, you know, this is a Western for you, this is a hero for you. I've always hoped Django Unchained might be a rite of passage that black fathers watch with their black sons when they get old enough. And actually, because it's kind of a violent movie, you might have to be at a certain age before you watch it, but that'll be up to your dad to decide.
A bit like, this goes back a ways. I watched with my father The Searchers.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a dad and son movie.
Yeah, to me, Good and the Bad and the Ugly was my Western that was kind of the dad and son film.
But your dad wasn't around.
My stepfather that I lived with for a little
I understand.
bit,
I understand. Well, I want to get back to this question of who are you?
Mm-hmm.
Again, we've talked about who you are professionally. Personally, deep down in your id, what do you care about? What really matters to you?
Apparently, I'm not answering the question because you've asked it 3 times in a row. I think what keeps revealing itself in my work, as far as the stuff that's coming from inside of me, what I'm really truly contributing to it. I have a vast interest in race in this country, in the way blacks and whites have dealt with each other, in particularly these last 100 years, and it's a theme that I can't get away from. I always keep going back to it. But it's such an important theme in America, and such an ignored theme for the most part in Hollywood movies, that I don't really need much more of a theme as long as I have that one. And I keep going back to it to some degree or another. And it's doesn't even always have to be about white and black, but it usually is. But then there also is the idea of, like a novelist, the examining of characters and characterizations. I want to put my characters under a microscope, and I like the idea that I don't really have, normally, Django might be an exception, but I don't normally have the normal kind of heroes that movies have. I've always believed that I wanted to have a novelist's right to write characters that are however they are. They have to be interesting, they have to be fascinating, but you don't have to like them. Now, actually, in some of the cases, I want to make it actually hard for you to like them, but you like them anyway. And now that's on you now, and now you have to deal with that yourself. And I really do like that. I like corrupting an audience to some degree or another, and making you challenge some of your thoughts and some of your feelings about what the people on screen do.
You like corrupting the audience to a certain degree.
To a certain degree, to actually show you something, and maybe show you that your little right and wrong world isn't as neat and pretty as you thought it was.
What makes you angry?
I don't like it when I don't like being threatened. I don't like anyone threatening me. I try not to ever do that to other people, and I just respond very badly when people do it to me, and I kind of have ever since I was a child. Were
you bullied at any time as a child?
Well, I mean, we all go through some sort of period of being bullied. You know, at some point, it stopped happening because I said enough of this. Right? But we've all had some, incident that we wish we had handled different when we were kids.
Yeah. I'm interested in your childhood, and I've read about your biography. this business, you dropped out of junior high school.
Yeah, I never made it to high school.
Middle school, yeah, never made it to high school. You were not a good speller, and you weren't particularly good at memorizing, weren't good at math, weren't good at science, none of those things.
Well, the weird part about what you're saying, though, is actually, like, I wasn't good at school. I didn't like school, and I kind of dropped out a couple years before I actually dropped out to some degree, as far as keeping up with school work and whatever. The thing that drove my parents crazy, my mom crazy, was the fact that I actually had a great memory. I just didn't apply it to schoolwork, all right? You know, when I was an actor, I never had any problem really memorizing lines, and like I'd go see a movie, and I would know everybody who was in it, and who directed it, and who wrote it, and I'd know all the different actors, and I'd hold all that stuff in my head. And no, I didn't know. I have a great memory. I only know how to point it to something I care about. The stuff I didn't care about, forget about it.
But you wind up, what, at age 16, working at the Pussycat Theater.
Yeah.
Basically a pornographic
It
theater
was,
house.
yeah.
Well, how did that affect you? I mean, I get this picture of a 16-year-old boy man, still a boy, constantly seeing hardcore pornographic material. I mean, this wasn't the soft stuff.
No. It was hard. It was the hard stuff. Yeah.
Well, what were you thinking?
Well, I wasn't affected in a adverse way to the explicit sexuality that I was seeing, because I didn't like the movies, and I thought they were just awful. All right, so
You mean as in making movies?
as movies, I just thought they were really awful and amateurish, and I wasn't really into them. Having said that, I worked there for about a year. There was a couple good movies in there, I will admit, but for the most part, I wasn't responding to them. So to me, it was just yucky. And there were certain things I hadn't had any experience with, so I was like, oh my God, oh, that's disgusting. I actually had to have the projectionist kind of explain to me, well, you're missing what's actually really interesting about this. Let me explain it to you. It was actually kind of funny, because I just rejected them aesthetically. So it was just kind of a job, as far as I was concerned. Having said that, though, now, I'm glad I had that experience. I'm really, really glad I had that experience, because I was literally living through the end of the porno industry as it was known in the 70s. I mean, this was still when people went to the movies. Right. I went out to a porno theater to see it. Even the Pussycat Theater was a respected chain. It wasn't one of the sleazy ones. But this was also, like if you watch the movie Boogie Nights, that movie is like promoting the kind of the beauty of the industry when it was shot on film, when the movies played in the movie theaters. And that was this whole bygone era that's almost entirely gone now. But I was there at the very end of it. I actually was part of it. I saw it. And even in retrospect, some of the movies that I saw back then, I like them more now because I know they really don't exist anymore.
But at the core of this question is, how did you prevent that messing up your head about sex, love, romance? Or did it?
It didn't. No, it didn't at all. I was actually very, very kind of like a romantic kid at that time. But that's not what I didn't watch porno films for romance. I watched romantic comedies. I mean, at that given time, I was turned off by the porno films, but I loved like the Italian sexy Lena Wertmüller movies at the time, or the Italian sexy Laura Antonelli movies at the time, something like Wife Mistress. That turned me on. Those movies at the Pussycat never turned me on because I just thought they were kind of gross and badly done. But that actually showed me, it was like, oh wow, see, if I cared about these characters, if there was a little care put involved in this, then all of a sudden the eroticism would get to me.
Well, now I want to pick up the thread. You eventually graduated, if that's a word, from Pussycat.
Yeah.
But you had a hard time making a living for a while. To what, 21, 22?
Yeah, exactly.
Where and how did the breakthrough happen?
What happened with me that worked out really good was there was this really fantastic video store in Manhattan Beach, which was a neighboring neighborhood of mine. And I just ended up stumbling into it one day. And there was this really groovy guy named Lance Lawson who ran the store. And he knew a whole lot about movies. And I was really flat on my ass at that time with really no real prospects, except possibly working in fast food places. And Lance offered me a job.
To be a clerk in this store.
Yeah, just to work in the video store. But, you know, there was an aspect about the job that was almost, you were almost like a movie critic to some degree, because people would want you to recommend movies to them and put them in their hands. And it wasn't about just trying to take some wild Quentin movie that I like and put it in Dan Rather's hands, but I actually prided myself on watching what you had rented before and getting a sense of what it is you liked, so I could actually really recommend something that you would like. And I was pretty good at that. I mean, so good at a certain point that people didn't even want to, okay, Quentin, what do I want? But there was a really interesting thing about that. I got to see how, you know, how right I was, because there always was feedback. It makes you stray out of your comfort zone and look at a couple things that I liked. I usually preface it for you so you'd have a sense of what it is you were taking home to watch. And then I'd be really curious about your response afterwards. And so there was a whole aspect of me actually getting in touch with an audience beyond just myself, of what actually worked with audiences and what they liked. I'm not the kind of person that will invite 10 people over to my house and me, myself, make this big dinner for them and then lay out the dinner and all 10 of us sit down and watch it and eat it. I'm more inclined to find a movie that I want to show people and then invite 10 or 12 people over to my house, and then I preface the movie and I kind of give it a little introduction and I show it to them. That's my way of entertaining. That's my way of being a good host.
Your use of music is by this time legendary.
Wow, thanks.
For example, the song Stuck in the Middle with You is synonymous with Reservoir Dogs. How do you select this music?
It's a big part of what I do, and I think it's a big part of the fun of modern movies, of modern cinema. And when I say modern, I'm meaning to some degree starting with Rock Around the Clock played in Blackboard Job, becoming a little bit more normal, and now it's very normal, is to have modern pop songs in your films. And not only are they in them, like you kind of cut the scenes to them. When you do it right, and the music and the movie kind of goes in sync with each other for a sequence or so, it's just kind of like you're flying or you're skating or something. And those are always just like the fun, some of the funnest parts to watch with an audience, because they're really engaged. I mean, in the days before video, I would go and see a movie 3 times at the theaters, basically because of one scene, and oftentimes that scene was like they used the song really well.
Right.
But the only way to you're really going to get it is to go back to the whole theater and watch the whole movie again for that one sequence, and I was happy to do that. How I end up doing it my own, I have a record room in my house. I'm a big vinyl guy. Surprise, surprise. And I have a room that's almost like a little used record store. It's in bins and it's broken down by genres and subgenres as per usual. And part of my thing when I'm coming up with an idea is to go through that record room and go through those records and to kind of find the music or the personality of a given movie. It's like I'm looking for the rhythm that this movie needs to play in. I'm looking for the spirit and the rhythm that this movie needs to play in. But that really helps me sink my hooks into, oh, hey, maybe we'll make this. And it keeps encouraging me. If I've been writing for 6 hours and I need to get invigorated again, then if I know I'm going to use a couple of sequences and I think I know how I'm going to use it, then I just play those songs and I imagine I'm in a movie theater and I'm imagining a bunch of people are sitting there watching it and I'm imagining they're being affected in a positive way by what they're seeing on screen. And I just pace around the room and I play the music and I kind of close my eyes, and sometimes I don't even have to close my eyes, and I can see the shots just play out in front of each other, and I feel myself like I'm in the Cinerama Dome, or I'm in the Palais of the Cannes Film Festival, the Grand Palais, and I'm surrounded by people, and they're all loving it.
And now, do you play this for the actors to get them motivated for the film?
Not often. It's a real pretty private thing. I give them little glimpses here and there, but for the most part, I actually rather, unless I'm using the music in the scene itself proper, I'd rather the actors just kind of experience it all when they watch the finished movie. But I'll do something at the same time, though. If it takes place in a time this would be applicable, I could make a tape that your character would listen to. If your character had a little mixtape of music that they liked, I could make a mixtape that your character would have made, and then you can listen to. And this is stuff that your character responds to.
I see. Play a little Johnny Cash or Frank Sinatra or whatever the character would have been.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Interesting. You've given me so much time, and I appreciate your generosity with your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Tremendously. And I'm pausing because I was warned, if you want to get thrown out of Quentin Tarantino's home, you try to talk about violence. But I'm intrigued by, you've taken a lot of criticism about the violence. And I recognize that you say, listen, that question's been asked and answered so many times, I'm sick and tired of it.
Yeah, that's really where I'm coming from.
But your ability to make a movie that by any objective standards is among the most violent movies made, but have an audience laugh during the time or come out of the movie smiling. How do you do that?
Well, you can see all kinds of movies, but when a movie really, really does it to me, it's because it's made me feel many different emotions during the course of it, and especially if I can pull off contradictory emotions that can actually work out. And I do believe that I'm the kind of director that I want to play you as an audience. I want to be the conductor, and you're my orchestra. And the sounds that I make you to make and the feelings I get you to feel, and then I stop you from feeling those feelings and I give you something else to feel, and then I stop you from feeling that and make you feel something else yet again. Well, if a director can do that, if a director can pull it off, well, that's a real lucky audience member, because you've really had an experience that night. You went to the movies. That was worth leaving the house, because hopefully you're doing it in sync and in unison with other people around you, and you're all having those feelings. And I can't help but make my stuff funny, because I just think of things in a humorous way. Now, it doesn't mean that it's all a big joke, and it doesn't mean it's all just to laugh it off. It's not all a big joke. Nothing wrong with a big joke. I'm a big Mel Brooks fan, but I'm not coming from just where his aesthetic. I'm coming from my own aesthetic. So I do like the idea that I can do to the audience: laugh, laugh, laugh. Stop laughing. Stop laughing. Laugh. All right. And maybe that stop laughing is something not so funny. Maybe that stop laughing is something horrific. It was very interesting in Django. There's a couple of sequences in particular that are very, very hard to watch for people. In particularly the Mandingo fight to the death that the two slaves are forced to do, and then there's a scene where a runaway slave is attacked by dogs. And then the more we kept cutting the movie, the more those two scenes got closer and closer to each other. All right, so it was really traumatizing the audience. And now, if I'm doing a movie about slavery, I don't mind traumatizing the audience. You should be somewhat traumatized in watching a film about slavery. You need to know what America was like at that time. You need to know what slavery means per se to some people, to indulge in that, to take you down that road and to make you experience those things. But then to actually be able to get you back onto the story again, and then actually after experiencing that to get you to laugh later, to me that's an accomplishment. But to actually get you smiling and clapping at something that's almost absurd, right? By the end is well, that's a good time at the movies, I think.
I'm going to go back to your youth and clean up a couple of things, if I may. One, did you have any religious training? Have you, at the present time or any time, considered yourself a religious person?
I think like most children, I went through from time to time various pages of religious fanaticism that kids do when they get born again or something like that, and get into that for a while. I think I was born Catholic, but I was never practiced, and I lived with my grandmother for a while in Tennessee, and I got involved with a Christian church there, and I got baptized and saved and all that stuff. But as time has gone on, as I've become a man, made my way further as an adult, I'm not sure how much of any of that I believe in. I mean, I don't really know if I believe in. I don't really know if I believe in God, especially not this Santa Claus character that people seem to have conjured up. Oddly enough, it's funny though. I do believe in God-given talent. I do believe that some people are. I do believe some people are given talent, and they're given gifts.
Are you one of those people?
I think I must be, and what I mean by that is, and that's not necessarily me reviewing my work. It's the fact that I think it's the trait of what I consider God-given talent is probably the thing that I'm the most famous for, or I'm known the most about, or is probably recognized the most is the dialogue that I write for my characters. And that's why it was really interesting listening to your Aaron Sorkin interview, because he's pretty good at it too. That's the easiest thing I do. It's the easiest part of what I do. Of all the things that I do, it's the easiest. And I try not to take it for granted, because it's always very easy to take for granted the gifts that come easier than others. But the fact that it actually is simple for me suggests that it's not necessarily coming from me, that it's coming from something else.
Could it have been environmental that developed this?
Well, I'm sure it is. The fact that I in particularly write a good black dialogue is a little bit attuned to the fact that I grew up around black people my whole life as a kid through my whole childhood, and I also pay very much attention to how people communicate with each other and how people talk and how couples talk, how people talk in group dynamics, how group dynamics deal with each other. I'm very fascinated in that. And I also think half of that is just having a good memory. All right, just, people have told me stories all through my life. People have told me jokes. People have told me little incidences. I just have a knack of remembering them, and they just stay there for the most part.
Stored somewhere back in your brain.
Just stored out there. And then when I'm writing and when the characters are talking, I psychically just reach into there and yank them out.
Now, I have read that you said, I'm not going to make any films after 60. Let me go on record saying, I don't believe it. I think you'll be making movies as long as you have your health.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny. I mean, there is a part of me. I'm 52 now. 60 doesn't seem that far away. There was a time it did seem far away. Now, not so much. All right. So it's a little more sober guy, if he says that, knows what he's talking about now. But the thing about it, and look, we'll see exactly what happens. And the last thing I want to do is a mission statement. But I do like the idea of leaving the audience wanting a little bit more, leaving the stage while I still have the stage, while I'm still there on the stage, and you're not making excuses for the work, and it's like, well, he used to be good, and then now from time to time,
yeah,
this
in
or that
baseball
and the
terms,
other.
he once was a home run hitter, but he now has warning track power.
Yes, exactly. I would rather leave the stage at the top of my game, or very, very near the top. If I think my best work is in front of me, well, then I probably would never stop. But I also think, but also there is this aspect of like, it almost seems like there's just a whole lot of directors, like they direct, and that's the only thing they know how to do, and so they just want to do it for as long as they can. And oftentimes it does end up being in diminishing returns. And the more directors are in particularly humorist, the more their work suffers once they get out of touch. Woody Allen is very rare, but there also is an aspect of, I am a writer. Maybe I don't want to be on a set at 65 and worrying about making my day and doing location scouting and everything, just all the things that go involved when it comes to making a movie.
So maybe you'd be a novelist.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, is like, a little little easier life, a little more sedate life, and then just I become a man of letters. I am writing novels, or I'm writing plays. Maybe I move over to theater. So it's not like my creative work is over, but at a certain point, if you're not going to climb Mount Everest with every movie, I'm not really. It's about the Mount Everest to some degree or another.
I understand.
Right?
Yeah.
So now I'm gonna make do with hills, or make do with a mountain that I can't climb. Maybe not actually, but a mountain would be but a book would be its own mountain. And then when I'm done, I'm done. You know, it's not like I have to go out. I always have to go out and make the damn thing after I spend a year or two writing a thing. But you know, to have that and to to have that would be nice. Also to do theater would be wonderful again because of the way I like my characters. You know, the one thing about the movies is then whoever you cast playing your character in the movie now is kind of locked in time, and if you've done a really good job of casting it, no one can imagine anybody else but then, like, say, Sam Jackson playing Jules in Pulp Fiction, or Uma Thurman playing Mia in Pulp Fiction. You can't imagine anybody else playing it. That's who they are, and that's a movie. However, in theater, I can write it, and an actor will play it, and when the play opens, but then, you know, other productions can happen, and other actors play the roles, and then maybe 10 years from now or 5 years from now, another people put it on, or maybe even after I'm dead. Eugene O'Neill was dead by the time Jason Robards first did Iceman Cometh. He never saw the greatest hickey to ever be. But that it still happened, and it happened without him, and it happened moving on. And I do like my characters, so I actually do think there is a limited aspect about the movies as far as just the characters are concerned. In theater, maybe they could breathe more and have different interpretations out there.
Wouldn't be a bad life being a novelist part of the time and a playwright the rest of the time.
It would be a great life. I just learned something the other day. It was real bad news, and it really fucking pissed me off, and I think I want to voice it right now.
Please. The forum is yours.
Basically, and I'm not talking about the whole country, but I'm talking about one theater in particular.
Oh, you sound nervous about this.
Well, it's a big fucking deal.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right, so we were going to play at the Cinerama Dome on the 25th. We were going to open there and play there exclusively for 2 weeks. And Star Wars was going to play the 2 weeks before us. And I grew up in Los Angeles, so I think of the Cinerama Dome as a real big deal and imagine seeing it at the Cinerama Dome.
Means something to you.
Exactly.
Right.
Disney, who owns Star Wars, decided, well, you know what? Maybe we want to play throughout the entire holiday season. And not, so we're going to go to the Cinerama Dome and say that they can't honor their contract with us to show the Hateful Eight. And the ArcLight people that own the Cinerama Dome said, no, you can't do that. We have a deal with the Hateful Eight people, and showing it in 70, that's what we do. You know, we have the 70mm projectors. They didn't have to move them in. That's the thing. We even start off with the Cinerama logo at the beginning. As of yesterday, Disney came to the ArcLight people and said, no.
Wow.
You are going to play Star Wars in the Cinerama Dome for the entire holiday season. And if you honor your deal with the Hateful Eight, we will not allow you to have Star Wars. The biggest movie in the world, we will not allow you to show it at any of your ArcLight movie theaters.
Oh. So in your mind, that's petty because they've got a big blockbuster on their hands.
They got the biggest movie in the world. We're talking about one effing theater. They are going out of their way to fuck me.
Quentin, in all fairness, I must say there's nobody from Disney here to refute that or to say.
No, but as far as
I understand how you feel.
As far as I'm concerned, and let all the entertainment reporters call up Disney as of now and ask for their comments about their extortionist practices.
Listen, Bob, I'm talking to Bob Iger. I don't give a shit about this theater. Quentin's a weirdo. Sorry, Quentin. The fucking kid, they got the stupid 70mm. They got all that shit that he cares about. He just wants to show his goddamn movie there. You're sitting on top of the world. You got Star Wars. What do you need this? Do me a favor, Bobby, for me. And you know we've had many private conversations. I fucking partied with this guy over at Jimmy Kimmel's. Bobby.
It would be gracious.
Be a gracious man. I want Quentin to show this new movie. He's worked his ass off. He wants the equipment. Hateful Eight. Would you do it for me? All right? Christmas. It's Christmas, for Christ's sake.